Designed to become. Build the habits and systems that create a better life. Published by MindRise Audio. Introduction. What if the life you are living is not the life you were meant to become? Not because you lack talent, not because you were given the wrong opportunities, but because, day after day, you have been repeating choices that are quietly designing your future. Think about your ordinary day, the thoughts you allow into your mind, the habits you repeat without questioning, the people you spend time with, the things you avoid, the promises you make to yourself, and the promises you break. None of these choices may seem important on their own, but together they create a direction, and direction, repeated long enough, becomes a life. This is where many people get stuck. They want a different future, but they keep living by the same patterns. They want confidence, but continue making choices that weaken their trust in themselves. They want freedom, but remain attached to routines that keep them comfortable. They want growth, but avoid the discomfort required to create it. They keep waiting for the right moment to change, the right motivation, the right opportunity, the right version of themselves. But change does not usually begin with the perfect moment. It begins with a decision to stop living entirely by default, a decision to become more intentional about who you are becoming. That is what this book is about. Designed to Become is not about creating a perfect life. It is not about becoming someone you are not, and it is not about changing everything overnight. It is about understanding something much more powerful. You are being shaped every day. The question is whether you are shaping yourself deliberately. Your future self is not created in one dramatic moment. It is created through ordinary choices made repeatedly. The way you spend an hour, the way you respond to failure, the standards you accept, the habits you protect, the thoughts you believe, the people you allow close to you. These things are not separate from your future. They are building it. And once you understand that, your everyday life begins to look different. A small decision matters, a repeated action matters, a single boundary matters, one promise kept to yourself matters. Because every choice sends a message about the person you are becoming. This book will take you through that process. You will begin by looking honestly at the life you are currently designing. You will learn how your patterns were formed and why familiar behaviors can be so difficult to change. Then you will move deeper. You will define the person you want to become. You will learn how to replace vague intentions with clear standards. You will discover why systems are often more powerful than motivation and why consistency matters more than intensity. You will also face the part of transformation that most people prefer to avoid. Resistance. There will be moments when the old version of you feels easier. There will be days when comfort sounds more attractive than growth. There will be times when you question whether your effort is working. Those moments matter, because becoming someone new does not mean destroying who you were. It means deciding which parts of your old life deserve to continue and which ones must finally be left behind. You do not need to transform your entire life today. You need to make a better choice today. Then another tomorrow, then another after that. Over time, those choices begin to change your habits. Your habits begin to change your identity, and your identity begins to change the way you live. That is the deeper message of Designed to Become. Your life is not only something that happens to you, it is also something you participate in creating. You may not control where you started. You may not control every circumstance. You cannot rewrite the past, but you have influence over what you practice next. You can choose what deserves your attention. You can choose what you repeat. You can choose what you tolerate. You can choose what you strengthen. And you can choose the person you are willing to become. So as you listen to this book, do not listen only for information. Listen for recognition. Notice the patterns that sound familiar. Notice the choices you have been postponing. Notice the version of yourself that appears in your everyday actions. You may discover that the life you want is not as far away as you thought, but you may also discover that it requires a different version of you to build it. That is where the real journey begins. Not with becoming perfect, not with becoming someone else, but with becoming more intentional about the person you already have the power to become. You are designing something every day. Your question is simple. What are you designing yourself to become? Chapter 1. You were never meant to stay the same. There is a version of you that exists only because you kept repeating the same choices. That version may be familiar. It may even feel like your personality. But familiarity is not proof of identity. Sometimes what you call who I am is simply who I have practiced being. Think about a person who has worked in the same place for years. Every morning the alarm rings, the same route follows, the same desk waits, the same conversations happen. At some point, the routine becomes invisible. Then one morning, the person receives an unexpected opportunity, a new role, a new responsibility, something that could change the direction of their life. Their first thought is not excitement. It is, that is not really me. Notice what happened. The opportunity did not prove they were incapable. Their old identity simply could not imagine itself in a new environment. This happens more often than we realize. A person who has always been quiet may believe they cannot speak with confidence. Someone who has failed several times may decide they are simply bad at trying new things. Someone who has spent years avoiding difficult decisions may begin to believe they are indecisive by nature. The label becomes comfortable. And once a label feels comfortable, we start protecting it. That is the central idea of this chapter. You are not required to remain the person your past created. Your past can explain you. It does not have to define you. Every human being changes. The question is whether that change is intentional. Look at a child learning to walk. Falling does not make the child conclude, I am not a walking person. The child falls, adjusts, and tries again. There is no complicated identity story attached to the failure. But somewhere along the way, adults learn to turn experiences into conclusions. I tried and failed, so I am not good at this. They rejected me, so I am not valuable. I have always been this way, so I cannot change. These conclusions can become invisible walls. The interesting part is that the wall may not be built from facts. It may be built from repetition. If you avoid speaking for 10 years, silence feels natural. If you postpone important decisions for 10 years, hesitation feels natural. If you criticize yourself every morning, self-doubt begins to sound like an honest voice. But natural does not always mean permanent. Your brain learns from repetition. Your behavior becomes easier when you practice it often. This is useful when you are building a good habit. It is also dangerous when you repeatedly practice a limitation. That means change often begins with a simple realization. You do not need to believe that you are already confident before you act confidently. You do not need to feel disciplined before you practice discipline. You do not need to become fearless before you take a brave step. Action can come before identity. Imagine someone who wants to become more confident at work. Instead of waiting to feel different, they make one small change. In the next meeting, they ask one thoughtful question. The following week, they share one idea. Later, they volunteer for a responsibility they would normally avoid. None of these actions feels dramatic, but something is happening beneath the surface. They are collecting evidence. Each action tells the mind, this is something I can do. Over time, the old statement, I am not that kind of person, begins to lose its authority. This is why personal growth is not only about learning new information, it is about giving yourself new evidence. Ask yourself where you may have confused your history with your identity. Maybe you were careless with money in the past. That does not mean you must always be careless with money. Maybe you were impatient in relationships. That does not mean patience is beyond you. Maybe you wasted years. That does not mean the next year must look the same. The past deserves honesty. It does not deserve unlimited control. There is another important distinction. Changing does not mean rejecting everything about yourself. You do not have to become louder because someone else is loud. You do not have to chase a career because society respects it. You do not have to build a personality that looks impressive from the outside. Real change is more personal than that. It means becoming more capable of living according to what matters to you. Perhaps you need to become more patient, perhaps more decisive, perhaps more courageous, perhaps more focused, perhaps simply more willing to tell the truth about what you want. The goal is not to create a fake version of yourself. The goal is to stop treating your current version as the final version. So, begin with observation. During the next few days, notice the sentences you use to describe yourself. Listen for words like always, never, that is just how I am, or I cannot do that. Then question them. Ask, is this truly who I am, or is this something I have practiced for a long time? That question can create a small gap between you and your old identity. Inside that gap is choice. And choice is where transformation begins. You may not be able to change your entire life today. You do not need to. Choose one behavior that no longer represents the person you want to become. Then choose one small action that points in a better direction. Make it specific. Make it small enough to do. Then repeat it. Do not judge the result too quickly. New identities need evidence. Let your actions accumulate. One conversation can change a relationship. One decision can change a direction. One repeated habit can change the way you see yourself. Your life does not need to become unrecognizable overnight. It needs to become more intentional, one choice at a time. You are allowed to outgrow your old patterns. You are allowed to surprise yourself. You are allowed to become someone your past could not predict. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is this. The person you have been is not a prison. It is a starting point. You are still becoming, and from this point forward, you can begin choosing what kind of person you become next. Chapter 2. The life you are currently designing. Most people think they are waiting for their real life to begin. They imagine that someday, when they earn more money, find the right opportunity, become more confident, or finally have enough time, life will start to look the way they want. But there is a problem with that idea. Your real life is already happening. It is happening on ordinary mornings. It is happening during the hours nobody notices. It is happening through the choices you make when there is no deadline, no audience, and no immediate reward. You are already designing your life. The question is whether you are designing it on purpose. Consider someone who says they want to become healthier. They genuinely mean it. They watch videos about exercise. They save healthy recipes. They promise themselves that next week will be different. But every evening they return home tired. They sit down with their phone. 1 hour becomes 2. Dinner becomes whatever is easiest. Sleep gets pushed later. Nothing seems serious in isolation. But repeat that pattern for a year, and the result is no longer small. This is how a life is often designed. Not through one enormous decision, but through hundreds of ordinary decisions that seem too insignificant to matter. A few minutes here, a skipped opportunity there. One more excuse, one more delay, one more evening spent exactly like the previous one. Eventually, the repeated choices become a lifestyle, and the lifestyle produces a result. This is why your daily life deserves closer attention than your occasional intentions. Intentions tell you what you hope for. Your routines tell you what you are actually building. That distinction can be uncomfortable. You may say that family matters most, but perhaps your attention is constantly captured by your phone. You may say that learning matters, but perhaps you never protect time for it. You may say that financial freedom matters, but perhaps your spending habits are built around immediate comfort. You may say that peace matters, but perhaps you keep saying yes to things that exhaust you. This is not about judging yourself. It is about seeing clearly. You cannot redesign a life you refuse to examine. One of the most useful questions you can ask is this: if I continue living exactly as I am living now, where will this life take me? Do not answer with your hopes. Answer with your patterns. If you keep spending the same way, what happens financially? If you keep treating your body the same way, what happens to your energy? If you keep avoiding difficult conversations, what happens to your relationships? If you keep learning at the same pace, what happens to your skills? If you keep giving your best hours to distractions, what happens to your important goals? These questions are powerful because they remove fantasy from the equation. They force you to look at direction. Imagine standing at a train station. You may want to reach a beautiful destination, but wanting to go there does not matter if you keep boarding a train headed somewhere else. Life works in a similar way. Your destination matters, but your direction matters first. Sometimes the most important change is not adding something new. It is noticing what is already taking you somewhere you do not want to go. A person may not need another productivity system. They may need to stop starting every morning with an hour of distraction. Someone may not need more confidence. They may need to stop breaking promises they make to themselves. Someone may not need a completely new life. They may need to change the small decisions that keep producing the same frustrations. This is where awareness becomes useful. For one ordinary day, pay attention to where your time goes. Do not try to impress yourself. Do not create the schedule you wish you followed. Record the day you actually lived. Notice when you were focused. Notice when you were distracted. Notice what gave you energy. Notice what drained it. Notice what you avoided. Notice what you repeatedly reached for whenever you felt bored, stressed, or uncomfortable. You may discover something surprising. Your schedule reveals your priorities more honestly than your words do. This does not mean every minute must be productive. Rest matters. Entertainment matters. Doing nothing sometimes matters. The goal is not to turn life into a machine. The goal is to make sure your choices reflect what you truly value. There is also a deeper reason this matters. Your environment is constantly teaching you what is normal. If the people around you complain about everything, complaining can begin to feel normal. If everyone around you spends without thinking, careless spending can feel normal. If the people around you take learning seriously, growth can begin to feel normal. Your surroundings quietly influence your standards. That means designing your life also means designing what you repeatedly expose yourself to. Ask yourself what your environment encourages. Does it make your desired behavior easier or harder? Does your phone sit beside you while you work? Does your workspace invite focus or distraction? Do the people around you respect your goals? Do your routines make good choices convenient? Small environmental changes can reduce the need for constant self-control. Put the book where you will see it. Move distracting apps away from your home screen. Prepare what you need before the behavior begins. Protect a small period of uninterrupted time. Make the better choice easier to reach. This is not about controlling every detail. It is about removing unnecessary friction. Your future is being shaped by what you repeatedly make easy. That idea can change the way you look at ordinary life. A morning is not just a morning, it is practice. A conversation is not just a conversation, it is practice. A decision is not just a decision, it is practice. Every repeated choice strengthens something. The question is, what are you strengthening? If your current life feels far from where you want to be, do not immediately conclude that everything must change. Start by finding the pattern with the greatest consequence. Maybe it is how you begin your mornings. Maybe it is how you spend your evenings. Maybe it is the people who constantly pull you away from your priorities. Maybe it is your habit of postponing decisions. Choose one. Do not attack your entire life at once. Change the pattern that is quietly influencing the others. then observe what happens. A better life is rarely created by one perfect plan. It is created when your ordinary actions begin pointing in the same direction as your values. That is the real power you have. You may not control every event. You may not control other people. You may not control how quickly opportunities appear, but you have influence over what you repeat, and what you repeat becomes the structure of your life. So look carefully at the life you are living today, not with shame, not with excuses, with honesty. Because once you can see the design, you can change it. And once you understand that your ordinary choices are shaping your future, the next question becomes unavoidable. If you have the power to design who you become, who will you choose to build? Chapter 3. Decide who you want to become. The future becomes difficult to build when you have never decided what you are building. You can work hard for years and still feel lost. You can stay busy every day and still move in the wrong direction. You can achieve goals that look impressive from the outside and discover that they do not feel meaningful on the inside. This happens when people focus on what they want to have without deciding who they want to become. A larger income can be measured. A better job can be measured. A new house can be measured. But qualities such as courage, patience, discipline, honesty, wisdom, and self-respect are different. They are not simply things you acquire. They are qualities you practice until they become part of how you live. That is why the next step in your transformation is not creating a longer list of goals. It is making a decision about the person behind those goals. Imagine two people who want the same result. Both want to become financially secure. The first person thinks only about the number they want in their bank account. Every decision is judged by whether it gets them closer to that number. The second person asks a different question. What kind of person manages money wisely? That question changes everything. The second person begins thinking about patience, self-control, planning, responsibility, and long-term thinking. The goal is still important, but now the goal has a character attached to it. This is the difference between chasing an outcome and building an identity. When you decide who you want to become, your choices become easier to evaluate. Suppose you want to become a dependable person. Then being dependable is not something you practice only when it is convenient. You arrive when you said you would. You finish what you agreed to finish. You communicate when circumstances change. You stop making promises simply because you want someone to like you. Your identity begins guiding your behavior. The same principle works in every area of life. If you want to become a calm person, you begin noticing how you respond under pressure. If you want to become a courageous person, you stop waiting for fear to disappear before acting. If you want to become a thoughtful person, you learn to listen before reacting. If you want to become a disciplined person, you practice doing important things even when you do not feel like doing them. The quality comes first. The behavior gives it evidence, and repetition makes it stronger. But there is an important warning here. Do not design your identity around someone else's expectations. It is easy to look at another person's life and assume their version of success should become yours. You see their career, their possessions, their confidence, their lifestyle, their achievements. Then you begin building a life that looks impressive but feels strangely empty. Before deciding who you want to become, ask a deeper question. What actually matters to me? Not what earns applause. Not what makes other people comfortable. Not what looks successful on social media. What matters when nobody is watching? Your answer may be surprisingly simple. You may want to become a person who has time for family, a person who keeps learning, a person who can be trusted, a person who has control over their attention, a person who creates more than they consume, a person who can walk away from what damages their peace. These choices may not look dramatic, but they can completely change the direction of a life. One useful exercise is to imagine yourself several years from now. Do not begin with possessions. Do not picture a house, a car, or a job title. Picture an ordinary day. How do you speak to people? How do you handle pressure? What do you do when something goes wrong? How do you spend your free time? What do you refuse to tolerate? What do people know they can expect from you? What do you respect about yourself? These questions reveal character, and character gives your future a foundation. Now bring that future version of yourself back into the present. Ask, what would that person practice today? Not someday, today. If you want to become healthier, what would that person do today? If you want to become financially responsible, what decision would that person make today? If you want to become more confident, what uncomfortable action would that person take today? This is where identity becomes practical. You do not have to wait years to become the person you described. You can practice being that person in small ways now. A person becomes patient by practicing patience during ordinary frustration. A person becomes brave by taking small actions while still feeling uncertain. A person becomes disciplined by keeping commitments that nobody else will know about. A person becomes wise by learning from consequences instead of constantly defending mistakes. You become through evidence. Every action gives you a reason to believe something about yourself. That means you should be careful with the promises you make to yourself. If you repeatedly say you will do something and repeatedly ignore your own word, you teach yourself that your intentions are not reliable. But the opposite is also true. When you make a small promise and keep it, you strengthen self-trust. You begin to think, when I decide something, I follow through. That belief can become powerful. It changes how you approach difficult situations. It changes what you expect from yourself. It changes the standards you are willing to accept. This is why your future identity should not be built from grand declarations. Build it from believable actions. Choose qualities that matter, then find small ways to practice them. Do not try to become everything at once. Choose a few qualities that would genuinely improve the way you live. Maybe it is discipline, maybe courage, maybe patience, maybe responsibility, maybe kindness. Then ask yourself what each quality looks like in behavior. What does a disciplined person actually do? What does a courageous person actually do? What does a responsible person actually do? The answers become your practice, and your practice becomes your evidence. There will be days when you fail. That does not cancel the identity you are building. It gives you another opportunity to practice it. A patient person can lose patience and choose to repair it. A disciplined person can have an unproductive day and return to the work. A courageous person can feel afraid and still take the next step. Becoming is not about never falling below your standard. It is about learning to return to it. So do not ask only, what do I want my life to look like? Ask the question that reaches deeper. What kind of person do I want to be when I am living that life? Then bring that answer into today, because your future self is not waiting somewhere in the distance. That person is being built by what you choose now. Decide who you want to become. Then give that decision a life through your actions. Chapter 4. Break the pattern before it breaks you. The hardest patterns to change are often the ones that do not look dangerous. They look normal. You wake up and reach for your phone. You delay one important task. You tell yourself you will start tomorrow. You avoid a conversation because you do not want tension. You spend money because you had a difficult day. You stay up too late even though you know tomorrow will be harder. Nothing seems serious, but repeated often enough, these choices can quietly shape the person you become. A pattern does not need to destroy your life in one moment to cause damage. It only needs to keep taking you in the wrong direction. That is why some problems become difficult to notice. They grow slowly. Think about a small leak in a roof. On the first day, you might barely notice it. After a few weeks, there is a stain. Months later, the ceiling begins to weaken. The damage did not suddenly appear. It accumulated. Our behavior can work the same way. One missed workout is not a problem. One distracted afternoon is not a problem. One unnecessary purchase is not a problem. One avoided conversation is not a problem. But when the same response becomes your default response, it becomes a pattern, and patterns have momentum. This is why knowing what you should do is often not enough. You may already know that you should exercise. You may know that you should save money. You may know that you should sleep earlier. You may know that you should stop checking your phone every few minutes. The problem is not always a lack of knowledge. Sometimes the problem is that the old behavior has become automatic. There is usually a moment before the behavior, a trigger. You feel bored, so you open an app. You feel stressed, so you eat. You feel uncertain, so you postpone the decision. You feel criticized, so you become defensive. You feel overwhelmed, so you avoid everything. The behavior may look like the problem, but often the deeper pattern begins with what happens immediately before it. This gives you a place to intervene. Imagine someone who repeatedly loses an hour to their phone every night. They decide the solution is simple. I need more self-control. But perhaps the real pattern begins when they bring the phone into bed. The phone is beside them. The room is quiet. They feel tired and want an easy reward. One message becomes another. One video becomes another. The person is not suddenly weak at midnight. The environment has been arranged to make the old behavior easy. Change the setup and the behavior becomes easier to change. This is an important lesson. Do not always fight a pattern at its strongest point. Change what happens before it. If you want to read more, put the book where you normally place your phone. If you want to exercise in the morning, prepare your clothes before going to sleep. If you want to spend less, create a pause before buying something unnecessary. If you want better conversations, decide in advance that you will listen before responding. The goal is not to become a person who constantly fights temptation. The goal is to create conditions where the better choice has a fair chance. But there is another reason patterns are difficult to break. They often give you something. Even harmful habits can provide a short-term reward. Avoiding a difficult task gives temporary relief. Checking your phone gives stimulation. Anger can create a feeling of control. Overspending can create temporary excitement. Staying comfortable can protect you from the fear of failure. The pattern survives because, for a moment, it solves a problem. The trouble is that it creates another problem later. This is why simply telling yourself to stop may not work. You need to understand what the behavior is doing for you. Ask yourself, what do I get from this pattern right now? The answer may reveal the real issue. Perhaps you are not addicted to distraction. Perhaps you are avoiding discomfort. Perhaps you are not lazy. Perhaps you are overwhelmed and do not know where to begin. Perhaps you are not indecisive. Perhaps you are afraid of making the wrong choice. Understanding the function of a behavior gives you a better opportunity to replace it. You do not just remove the old response. You create a better response to the same need. If stress makes you reach for your phone, try a short walk before opening it. If uncertainty makes you postpone a task, write down the first step instead of trying to solve everything at once. If loneliness leads you toward unhealthy distractions, contact someone you trust. The replacement does not have to be perfect. It has to be better. Another powerful step is to stop treating every failure as proof that change is impossible. Suppose you are trying to break a habit and fall back into it. The old response is to think, I ruined everything. That thought can become part of the pattern. You feel disappointed, then you give up, then you repeat the behavior. A better response is different. Notice what happened, ask what triggered it, identify what you could change next time, then continue. One mistake should become information, not an identity. You are learning the structure of the pattern, and once you can see the structure, you can begin changing it. For the next week, choose one pattern, not 5. 1. Write down when it usually happens. Notice what you were feeling before it. Notice where you were. Notice what you were thinking. Notice what reward you received from the behavior. Then choose one small interruption, create a delay, change your environment, replace the action, make the unwanted behavior slightly harder, make the desired behavior slightly easier. Do this repeatedly. You are not trying to win a battle every hour. You are trying to change the path that your behavior naturally follows. That distinction matters, because lasting change does not always come from stronger resistance. Sometimes it comes from smarter design. You have already learned how to repeat your current patterns. Now you can learn how to interrupt them. The moment you notice a familiar pattern beginning, you have a choice. You can follow the old path, or you can pause. That pause may last only a few seconds, but it creates something powerful. Space between the trigger and the response. And inside that space, you can choose differently. Do not wait until a pattern has taken years from you. Notice it while it is still small. Break it while you still have room to choose. Because the patterns you refuse to change today may eventually become the life you struggle to escape tomorrow. Chapter 5. Build the systems that build you. Motivation can get you started, but motivation is a poor place to build your life. It changes with your mood. It disappears when you are tired. It becomes weaker when the results are slow. If your progress depends on feeling inspired, your progress will always be unpredictable. That is why the next step is not to become more motivated. It is to become better at designing systems. A system is simply a structure that helps a desired behavior happen repeatedly. You do not need to make every decision from scratch. You create a way of doing things that supports the person you want to become. Consider two people who want to read more. The first person makes a promise. I am going to read 30 books this year. It sounds impressive. The second person creates a system. They read 10 pages after breakfast every morning. The book stays on the table. Their phone stays in another room. The first person has a goal. The second person has a process. And when life becomes busy, the process has a better chance of surviving. This is one of the most important shifts you can make. Stop asking only, "What do I want?" Start asking, "What system would make that result more likely?" If you want to exercise, when will you do it? Where will you keep your equipment? What will you do on busy days? If you want to learn a skill, when will you practice? What will you study first? How will you track your progress? If you want to save money, when will you review your spending? How will you separate savings from everyday spending? What rule will you follow when you want to buy something impulsively? A goal describes a destination. A system determines how often you move. This matters because most people underestimate the power of ordinary repetition. They think transformation comes from intense effort. They imagine a perfect morning routine, a huge burst of discipline, a dramatic decision. But real progress often looks much less exciting. It looks like 20 focused minutes, one healthy meal, one page, one honest conversation, one small financial decision, 1 hour protected from distraction. These actions may feel insignificant, but a good system makes them repeatable, and repeatable actions are where change becomes real. There is also a hidden benefit. Systems reduce the number of decisions you have to make. Imagine that every morning you ask yourself whether you should exercise. Some days you will say yes. Other days you will negotiate. You are tired. The weather is bad. You have work. You will do it tomorrow. Now imagine that exercise already has a place in your morning. There is nothing to debate. It is simply what happens at that time. You have moved the behavior from a daily argument into a daily structure. This is why routines can protect you from your weaker moments. You do not need to feel committed every morning. You only need to follow the structure you already created. But a system should not become a prison. Life changes. Your responsibilities change. Your energy changes. Your priorities change. A useful system has room for reality. Suppose your normal workout takes an hour. One day, you only have 15 minutes. The question is not, should I skip everything? The better question is, what is the smallest version of this habit I can still complete? Maybe you walk for 15 minutes. Maybe you do a short workout. Maybe you practice one exercise. The goal is to protect the pattern. Consistency does not mean doing the maximum every time. It means staying connected to the behavior. This idea can transform the way you think about difficult days. You do not need a perfect version of your routine. You need a version that survives real life. That is why every important system should have a minimum standard. A minimum standard is the smallest action you are willing to take, even when circumstances are not ideal. Read 2 pages. Write for 10 minutes. Walk for 10 minutes. Review your finances for 5 minutes. Clean one small area. The action is intentionally small. Its purpose is not impressive results. Its purpose is continuity. Once continuity exists, progress has something to build on. Your environment is another part of the system. People often rely on willpower while keeping temptation within easy reach. That is unnecessary. If something distracts you, increase the distance. If something helps you, reduce the distance. Put your workout clothes where you can see them. Keep healthy food available. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Keep important work open and ready. Make the first step obvious. These changes may seem simple. That is exactly why they work. You are not trying to become stronger than every distraction. You are making distraction less convenient. The same principle applies to your surroundings. The people you spend time with can become part of your system. So can the places you work. So can the information you consume. So can the way you start and end your day. Your environment constantly sends signals about what deserves your attention. Choose those signals carefully. There is one more part of a strong system that people often ignore. Review. A system should teach you. Once a week, take a few minutes to ask what worked and what did not. Did the schedule fit your real life? Was the habit too difficult? Was the environment helping? Where did you repeatedly lose focus? What made the good behavior easier? Then adjust. Do not treat a failed system as a personal failure. Treat it as a design problem. If you keep missing your morning routine because you sleep too late, perhaps the real system begins at night. If you keep forgetting to practice, perhaps the practice time is not connected to an existing habit. If you keep abandoning a goal because it feels too large, perhaps the first step needs to become smaller. A system should evolve as you learn. That is how you make it sustainable. You are not simply building systems to achieve goals. You are building systems that shape you. A writing routine can make you more disciplined. A reading routine can make you more thoughtful. A financial system can make you more responsible. A health routine can make you more consistent. A focused work system can teach you to protect your attention. The system changes the behavior. The behavior changes the person. And eventually, the person no longer needs to force the behavior in the same way. It becomes part of how they live. So choose one area of your life that matters. Do not redesign everything. Build one simple system. Give the behavior a specific time. Make the first step easy. Remove one source of friction. Create a minimum version for difficult days. Review the system regularly. Then let repetition do its work. You do not need a perfect plan for the next 10 years. You need a structure that helps you make a better choice today and gives you a reason to make that choice again tomorrow. Because the systems you build are doing more than organizing your days. They are quietly building you. Chapter 6. Keep your promises to yourself. There is a quiet kind of confidence that nobody can give you. It comes from knowing that when you tell yourself you will do something, you can trust your own word. You do not need an audience for it. You do not need praise. You do not even need anyone else to know. You simply know that you can count on yourself. That kind of confidence is built differently from confidence that comes from achievement. It is built through self-trust, and self-trust is built by keeping promises to yourself. Think about a person who repeatedly says, "Tomorrow I will start." Tomorrow arrives. They do not start. Then they say it again. Another tomorrow comes. The same thing happens. After enough repetition, something changes beneath the surface. The person may still want the goal. They may still believe they are capable, but part of them has stopped believing their own commitments. This can be difficult to notice because the damage is quiet. There is no dramatic moment when self-trust disappears. It happens through small broken agreements. You promise to wake up early, then ignore the alarm. You promise to finish an important task, then spend the evening distracted. You promise to stop spending unnecessarily, then make another impulse purchase. You promise yourself that you will speak honestly, then remain silent because honesty feels uncomfortable. Each event seems small, but your mind is paying attention. Every action becomes evidence. If you repeatedly break your own promises, you teach yourself that your intentions are optional. If you repeatedly keep them, you teach yourself that your word has weight. This is why discipline is deeper than simply getting things done. Discipline changes the relationship you have with yourself. Imagine two people who both decide to exercise. One creates a huge plan. They will exercise 6 days a week, follow a strict diet, wake up before sunrise, and completely change their lifestyle. For a few days, everything goes perfectly. Then life becomes difficult. They miss a workout. The plan breaks. They feel disappointed and eventually stop. The second person makes a smaller promise. I will move my body for 15 minutes every morning. It is not impressive, but it is realistic. On difficult days, they still do the minimum. After several weeks, something important has happened. They have evidence that they follow through. That evidence matters more than the size of the original promise. This is why you should be careful about making promises that sound good but are difficult to keep. A promise should challenge you without constantly setting you up to fail. If you tell yourself you will read 50 pages every day, but your schedule makes that unrealistic, you may create a cycle of failure. A better commitment might be 10 pages. Once that becomes reliable, you can increase it. The goal is not to impress yourself with ambition. The goal is to become someone who follows through. This creates an important distinction between intensity and reliability. Intensity says, I will give everything today. Reliability says, I will still be doing this when today is over. Reliability is quieter, but over time it becomes powerful. It allows you to build confidence without needing constant emotional excitement. You begin to know what you can expect from yourself. That changes the way you approach difficult goals. You stop wondering whether you will quit at the first obstacle. You stop needing to negotiate with yourself every morning. You have already built a history of following through. But keeping promises to yourself does not mean becoming rigid. Sometimes you will make a commitment and discover that the circumstances have changed. Perhaps the goal no longer matters. Perhaps your priorities have shifted. Perhaps the promise was based on information you no longer have. Changing a commitment is not the same as breaking it. The important thing is to make the change consciously. Do not simply abandon the promise. Decide. Say to yourself, this is no longer the right commitment, and here is why. That is still self-respect. The real danger is making promises casually and breaking them casually. Over time, that creates a pattern of distrust. Another important lesson is that self-trust does not require perfection. You will fail. You will have distracted days. You will make poor decisions. You will sometimes choose comfort over responsibility. The mistake is not the end of the process. What matters is what you do next. Suppose you planned to write for 30 minutes and spent the entire evening watching videos instead. You have two choices. You can say, I always do this, I never change. Or you can say, I broke my commitment today. What happened and what can I change tomorrow? The second response protects your ability to continue. It turns failure into information. This is also why you should stop making your commitments dependent on how you feel. Feelings are real, but they change. You may not feel like exercising. You may not feel like studying. You may not feel like having the difficult conversation. You may not feel like doing the work that matters. If every promise depends on motivation, the promise is not really a promise. It is a preference. Sometimes you will need to act before the feeling arrives. That does not mean ignoring your emotions. It means refusing to let every temporary emotion make your decisions for you. Start small. Choose one promise that matters. Make it specific. Make it realistic. Make it measurable. Then keep it. If you say you will read for 10 minutes, read for 10 minutes. If you say you will walk after dinner, walk after dinner. If you say you will spend 30 minutes on an important project, protect that time. Do not keep adding new commitments. Let one promise become trustworthy first. Then build another. There is something powerful about reaching the end of a day and knowing you did what you said you would do. Nobody may congratulate you, nothing dramatic may happen, but inside, something changes. You become a little more reliable, a little more disciplined, a little more certain. You begin to understand that confidence does not always come from believing you can do something. Sometimes confidence comes from having proof that you do what you say, and that proof is created quietly. One promise, one action, one day at a time. Eventually, you stop needing to ask whether you are capable of becoming the person you want to be. Your own history begins answering the question. You have kept the promises. You have returned after failure. You have followed through when nobody was watching. And that is how self-trust is built. Not through a speech, not through a feeling, through evidence. So choose your next promise carefully. Make it small enough to keep, then keep it. Because every time you keep your word to yourself, you are not merely completing a task, you are teaching yourself something deeper. You are becoming someone you can trust. Chapter 7. Choose growth when comfort calls. Comfort rarely tells you to give up. It usually speaks more gently than that. It says, you can do it later. It says, you have worked hard enough. It says, there is no need to make things difficult. Sometimes that voice is reasonable. You really may need rest. You may need to slow down. You may need to protect your energy. But there are also moments when comfort is not protecting you. It is protecting the version of you that does not want to change. That is where growth becomes difficult. You can know what needs to happen and still feel a powerful desire to stay where you are. A person may know they should apply for the position, but fear rejection. They may know they need to learn a new skill, but feel embarrassed about being a beginner. They may know they need to have an honest conversation, but prefer temporary peace over necessary truth. They may know they have outgrown a situation, but remain because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. None of this makes them weak, it makes them human. The problem begins when comfort becomes the main decision maker. There is an important difference between rest and avoidance. Rest helps you return stronger. Avoidance helps you escape something you do not want to face. From the outside, they can look almost identical. You take a day off because you are exhausted. That may be healthy. You take another day off because starting feels uncomfortable. That may be avoidance. You stay quiet because the moment is not right. That can be wisdom. You stay quiet because you are afraid of how someone might react. That may be fear. The action is not always the clue. The reason behind the action often is. This is why growth requires honesty. You have to ask yourself, am I choosing this because it is right for me or because it is easier for me? That question can be uncomfortable, but it can also be freeing. Imagine someone who has wanted to change careers for years. They spend months researching. They watch tutorials. They imagine what life could look like, but they never take the first serious step. Every time they consider applying for a new role, fear appears. What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I am not good enough? So they return to what is familiar. The familiar job feels safe, but safety has a cost. Years later, they may discover that they were not protected from risk. They were simply protected from change. This is an important truth. Avoiding discomfort does not remove uncertainty. It only guarantees that your current situation continues. Growth asks you to tolerate a temporary period of not knowing. You will not always feel ready. You will not always feel confident. You may not even know exactly what you are doing. Sometimes the first step is taken with uncertainty still present. That is what makes it growth. But growth does not mean constantly choosing the hardest possible path. You do not need to suffer to prove that you are serious. You do not need to make every day difficult. You need to become better at recognizing useful discomfort. Useful discomfort is the discomfort that comes from doing something aligned with your values. Learning feels uncomfortable because you do not know everything yet. Exercise feels uncomfortable because your body is adapting. Setting a boundary feels uncomfortable because someone may dislike it. Starting a business feels uncomfortable because the outcome is uncertain. Speaking honestly feels uncomfortable because you cannot control the response. These experiences can stretch you. They do not necessarily damage you. There is a difference between pain that signals harm and discomfort that signals expansion. Learning to recognize that difference is part of becoming mature. One practical way to develop this ability is to stop asking, "How can I avoid feeling uncomfortable?" Ask instead, "What discomfort is worth experiencing?" That question changes the conversation in your mind. You may decide that 30 minutes of focused work is worth the discomfort of not checking your phone. You may decide that an honest conversation is worth the temporary tension. You may decide that being a beginner is worth the embarrassment of making mistakes. You may decide that saying no is worth disappointing someone. You are no longer trying to eliminate discomfort. You are choosing which discomfort serves your future. There is another trap that often appears during growth: comparison. You see someone who is already where you want to be, and you compare their current results with your beginning. You see the finished skill. You do not see the awkward attempts that came before it. You see the confidence. You do not see the years of uncertainty. You see the result. You do not see the repetition. This can make your own progress feel insignificant. Do not let someone else's advanced stage convince you that your beginning is embarrassing. Every capable person was once inexperienced. Every strong skill began as an awkward attempt. Your job is not to look impressive while learning. Your job is to keep learning. Growth also requires patience. There will be periods when you are working hard and seeing very little change. That does not always mean nothing is happening. Some forms of progress are invisible before they become obvious. A person may practice speaking for months before others notice confidence. Someone may save money quietly before their financial situation changes significantly. A person may spend years developing a skill before receiving the opportunity they wanted. Do not demand immediate proof from every effort. Some results need time to accumulate. This is where the lessons of the earlier chapters begin to connect. You know that your choices shape your direction. You know that your patterns can be changed. You know that systems make good behavior easier. You know that keeping promises builds self-trust. Now you must decide what you will do when following those principles becomes uncomfortable. That moment matters. Because the person you want to become will eventually ask something of you that your current comfort zone does not want to give. It may ask for courage. It may ask for patience. It may ask for discipline. It may ask you to leave something behind. When that moment comes, pause before automatically choosing the easier option. Ask yourself 3 questions. What am I avoiding? What would happen if I faced it? What kind of person would I become by taking the next step? You do not need to solve your entire future. You only need to identify the next honest step. Take it while the fear is still there. Take it while the uncertainty is still there. Take it without waiting for perfect confidence, because confidence often comes after action, not before it. Comfort has a place in your life. Rest, recovery, peace, enjoyment. These things matter, but comfort should be a place you return to. It should not become a place you hide. Your life expands when you are willing to step beyond what is familiar. And every time you choose meaningful growth over unnecessary comfort, you send yourself a message. You are capable of more than your current limits suggest. So when comfort calls, listen carefully. Sometimes it is telling you to rest, and sometimes it is asking you to stay small. Learn the difference, then choose accordingly. Because the future version of you will not be built by avoiding every uncomfortable moment. It will be built by deciding which moments are worth walking through. Chapter 8. Become through repetition. Most people expect transformation to feel dramatic. They imagine a moment when everything finally changes, a decision, a breakthrough, a powerful realization, something that makes the old version of them disappear. But real transformation is usually much quieter. It happens when nobody is watching. It happens on ordinary mornings, during ordinary choices, through actions that seem too small to matter. You become through repetition, not through what you do once, but through what you keep doing. Think about a musician learning an instrument. The first practice session may feel exciting. The 10th may feel frustrating. The 100th may feel ordinary. But after enough repetition, something changes. The fingers move with less hesitation. The ear becomes more sensitive. The difficult parts become familiar. The musician does not need to think about every movement. The skill has become part of them. Personal growth works in much the same way. You do not become disciplined because you completed one difficult task. You become disciplined because you repeatedly practice doing what matters. You do not become patient because you handled one frustrating situation well. You become patient because you keep practicing your response when frustration returns. You do not become confident because you succeeded once. You become confident because you repeatedly take action, learn from mistakes, and discover that you can handle what happens next. Repetition turns behavior into something deeper. It turns an action into a tendency into a habit into a standard, and a standard begins to shape identity. This is why small actions deserve more respect than they usually receive. A person who reads 5 pages every day may not feel like a reader after the first week, but months later they have read hundreds of pages. A person who saves a small amount regularly may not feel financially secure at first, but the habit is building a different relationship with money. A person who spends 10 minutes learning a skill may feel like they are making almost no progress, but repeated learning creates knowledge that did not exist before. The power is not in the size of one action, the power is in its return. This also explains why negative patterns can become so strong. Repetition works in both directions. If you repeatedly complain, complaining becomes easier. If you repeatedly avoid difficult conversations, avoidance becomes easier. If you repeatedly give up when progress is slow, quitting becomes familiar. The mind does not automatically ask whether a repeated behavior is good for you. It simply learns what you practice. That gives you a powerful responsibility. You must be careful about what you rehearse. Every reaction is practice. Every habit is practice. Every response to difficulty is practice. Every choice about your attention is practice. The question is not only, what did I do today? The deeper question is, what did I practice becoming today? Imagine 2 people facing criticism. The first person immediately becomes defensive. This happens again and again. Over time, defensiveness becomes automatic. The second person practices pausing before responding. How's in journey. At first it feels unnatural. They may still become defensive sometimes, but they keep practicing the pause. Eventually the pause becomes easier. The difference between them was not necessarily personality, it was repetition. This is why you should not judge yourself too quickly when a new behavior feels awkward. Awkwardness is often a sign that you are practicing something unfamiliar. If you have spent years avoiding difficult conversations, speaking honestly may feel strange. If you have spent years distracting yourself, focused work may feel uncomfortable. If you have spent years doubting yourself, making decisions with confidence may feel unnatural. Do not mistake unfamiliarity for inability. You are simply giving your mind a new pattern to learn. There is another important part of repetition. Frequency matters, but so does quality. Repeating an action without attention can strengthen the wrong thing. For example, someone can spend years working without learning how to work effectively. Someone can repeat the same mistake without examining it. Someone can exercise regularly with poor technique. Repetition alone is not enough. You want deliberate repetition. That means paying attention to what you are doing and making small corrections. Practice, observe, adjust, practice again. This creates a cycle of improvement. It also protects you from another common mistake, trying to change too much at once. When people become excited about personal growth, they often create a long list of new behaviors. Wake up early, exercise, read, meditate, learn a language, start a business, eat perfectly, work longer, sleep better. For a few days, everything feels possible. Then the system becomes too demanding. One missed habit affects another. The schedule becomes exhausting. Eventually, the person returns to old patterns and concludes that they lack discipline. The real problem may have been the design. Transformation needs repetition, and repetition needs sustainability. Choose fewer things, give them time, let one behavior become stable before adding another. You are not trying to create the perfect version of yourself in 30 days. You are trying to build patterns that can survive years. This is where patience becomes important. Some changes are visible quickly, others take much longer. A seed does not look like a tree while it is growing. You cannot judge its progress by looking at it for one afternoon. Human growth can be similar. You may be becoming more disciplined without feeling disciplined. You may be becoming more confident without feeling confident. You may be becoming wiser while still making mistakes. The evidence appears over time. This is why you should learn to value the process of becoming. Do not ask every morning whether you have transformed. Ask whether you practice the quality you want to strengthen. If you want to become focused, practice focus. If you want to become reliable, practice reliability. If you want to become calm, practice calm responses. If you want to become courageous, practice taking small risks. Give your desired identity something to stand on. Your repeated actions become that foundation. There is also freedom in understanding this. You do not need to reinvent yourself today. You only need to influence what you repeat. That makes transformation feel less overwhelming. You can begin with one conversation, one routine, one response, one decision, then repeat it. The person you become is being shaped quietly by these repetitions. Years from now, you may look back and realize that the biggest changes did not come from one extraordinary day. They came from hundreds of ordinary days that seemed almost unimportant while you were living them. That is the hidden power of repetition. It makes small things significant. It turns practice into ability. It turns behavior into character. And it turns character into a life. So be intentional about what you repeat. Repeat the actions that strengthen you. Repeat the standards that matter. Repeat the choices that move you toward the person you have decided to become. Because every day gives you another opportunity to practice your future. And eventually, what you practice becomes what you are. Chapter 9. Protect the person you are becoming. Becoming a better version of yourself is only half the work. The other half is protecting that progress. You can build discipline and still lose it through the wrong environment. You can develop confidence and slowly surrender it through constant criticism. You can create better habits and then return to the situations that make those habits difficult to maintain. Growth is not only about moving forward, it is also about learning what can pull you backward. Imagine someone who has spent months rebuilding their focus. They wake up earlier, they work without constantly checking their phone, they have learned to protect certain hours of the day. Their work improves, their mind feels clearer. Then they begin spending time with people who constantly interrupt them. They start saying yes to every request. They return to old routines. At first, nothing seems serious. One evening becomes several. One exception becomes a habit. Eventually, they wonder why their focus has disappeared. The problem was not that their discipline suddenly stopped working. Their environment changed. This is an important truth about personal growth. The person you are becoming needs an environment that allows that person to survive. Your surroundings can either reinforce your progress or quietly weaken it. That includes more than physical surroundings. It includes people, conversations, information, expectations, entertainment, schedules, and the standards you repeatedly accept. You do not need to remove everyone who is different from you. You do not need to live in isolation. But you do need to notice what consistently happens to you around certain people. Do you become more focused or more distracted, more honest or more guarded, more confident or more doubtful, more responsible or more careless, more peaceful or more reactive? The answers can reveal something important. Some environments require too much effort just to remain the person you are trying to become. When that happens, the solution is not always greater willpower. Sometimes the solution is distance. This can be difficult because familiar relationships carry history. You may care about someone deeply and still recognize that certain patterns between you are unhealthy. You may love a person without agreeing with every expectation they have for your life. You may respect someone's past role in your life without allowing that role to control your future. Boundaries are not always rejection. Sometimes they are protection. A boundary can be as simple as saying no without giving a long explanation. It can mean ending a conversation when it becomes disrespectful. It can mean protecting your working hours. It can mean refusing to participate in behavior that no longer matches your values. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. That does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort is simply the feeling of changing an old relationship with your own limits. There is another threat to personal growth that is easier to overlook: constant exposure. What you repeatedly watch, read, hear, and scroll through becomes part of your mental environment. Imagine trying to develop focus while spending every spare moment consuming short bursts of information. You may be physically still, but your attention is constantly being trained to move. Imagine trying to become more content while constantly comparing your life with carefully edited images of other people's lives. The problem is not that every piece of content is harmful. The problem is accumulation. What enters your mind repeatedly begins to influence what feels normal. This is why protecting your attention is part of protecting your identity. Ask yourself what you consume when you are bored. What do you reach for when you are stressed? What kind of conversations fill your day? What ideas do you hear repeatedly? What emotions are those inputs creating? You do not have to control everything. You simply need to become more selective. Your attention is limited. Spend it where you want your mind to grow. The same principle applies to commitments. As you grow, you may need to stop saying yes to everything. There was a time when you may have accepted every request because you wanted to be helpful. But if every yes leaves you exhausted, your kindness may be costing you the ability to do what matters most. Saying no does not automatically make you selfish. Sometimes it means you understand your limits. Every commitment consumes something: time, energy, attention, responsibility. Before saying yes, Ask yourself what the commitment will require from you. Then ask whether it deserves that cost. This becomes especially important when your priorities change. The person you are becoming may not want the same things you once wanted. That can create tension. People may ask why you have changed. Sometimes they are simply surprised. Sometimes they are uncomfortable because your new choices affect their expectations. You do not need to convince everyone. Growth does not require universal approval. You can explain yourself when explanation is useful, but you do not need permission to mature. There is also a quieter form of protection. Protect yourself from unnecessary self-sabotage. After making progress, some people become careless because they think they have finally arrived. They stop paying attention. They stop reviewing their habits. They begin making exceptions. Then the exceptions become normal again. Never assume that a pattern cannot return. The goal is not to become afraid of your old life. The goal is to recognize it quickly if it appears again. A useful question is, what conditions make me more likely to return to my old behavior? Maybe it happens when you are exhausted. Maybe after conflict. Maybe when you feel lonely. Maybe when you stop following your routine. Maybe when you spend too much time around certain people. Know your weak points without being ashamed of them. Awareness gives you a chance to prepare. If you know exhaustion makes you careless, protect your sleep. If stress makes you isolate yourself, create a healthier way to ask for support. If certain situations repeatedly pull you into old behavior, change your exposure to those situations. Protection is not fear, it is preparation. And there is one more thing worth protecting: your standards. When you begin changing, there may be moments when you are tempted to return to what is familiar simply because it is familiar. You may tell yourself that it is not that bad. You may convince yourself that one compromise does not matter. Sometimes it truly does not. But repeated compromise can quietly lower the standard you worked hard to create. Your standards tell you what you are no longer willing to normalize. They help you make decisions before emotions take control. If you have decided that your health matters, protect that standard. If you have decided that honesty matters, protect it. If you have decided that your time matters, protect it. If you have decided that certain behavior is no longer acceptable in your life, protect that boundary. Not perfectly, but consistently. The person you are becoming deserves support from the life around you. Give that person better conditions. Choose relationships that respect your growth. Choose environments that support your priorities. Choose information that strengthens your thinking. Choose commitments that deserve your energy. And choose boundaries that protect what you are building. You have spent this journey learning how to change. Now learn how to remain changed. Because growth is not only the courage to become someone new, it is also the wisdom to protect that person once you do. The future you are building needs more than effort. It needs protection. And what you protect today has a much better chance of becoming the life you keep tomorrow. Chapter 10. Design the life that reflects you. There comes a point when personal growth stops being about fixing what is wrong. It becomes about deciding what is worth building. You have spent this journey looking at your choices, your identity, your patterns, your systems, your promises, your resistance, your repetition, and the things that protect your growth. Now there is one final question. What kind of life do you want those choices to create? Not the life that looks impressive from a distance. Not the life that earns the most approval. Not the life someone else designed for you. Your life. A life that reflects what you genuinely value. This question is more important than it may first appear. Many people spend years achieving goals they never consciously chose. They follow the expected path, study what seems practical, take the job that seems respectable, buy what others consider successful. Stay busy because everyone around them is busy. Then, one day, they have many of the things they once wanted and still feel disconnected from their own life. The problem is not always failure. Sometimes it is success without alignment. That is why designing your life requires more than deciding what you want to achieve. You need to know what you want your life to feel like. Imagine two people with similar careers and similar incomes. One spends most of their time working because achievement is their highest priority. The other protects evenings for family, values a slower pace, and measures success partly by the freedom their work creates. Neither life is automatically better. The important question is whether each person chose it consciously. A meaningful life does not have to look extraordinary. It has to make sense to the person living it. For one person, success may mean building a large company. For another, it may mean having enough freedom to spend more time with family. For someone else, it may mean creating art, teaching, serving others, or living with fewer possessions. There is no universal design. There is only the responsibility to understand your own. This is why comparison can become so destructive. When you constantly measure your life against someone else's, you begin borrowing goals without borrowing the values behind them. You see the result. You do not see the trade-offs. You see the lifestyle. You do not see the sacrifices. You see what they have. You do not know what they had to give up to get it. A life that looks successful from the outside may be completely wrong for you. So ask yourself what you are actually optimizing for. Freedom, security, family, creativity, learning, service, adventure, peace, mastery, influence, stability. Your answer will affect almost every major decision you make. If freedom matters most, you may choose differently about money and work. If family matters most, you may protect your evenings differently. If learning matters most, you may organize your time around curiosity. If peace matters most, you may become more selective about the people and commitments you allow into your life. Values become useful when they influence decisions. Otherwise, they are simply words. This is where your life design becomes practical. Look at your calendar. Does it reflect what you say matters? Look at your spending. Does it support your priorities? Look at your relationships. Do they reflect the kind of person you want to be? Look at your attention. Where does it go most often? Look at your habits. What kind of future are they preparing you for? These questions may reveal gaps. That is not a reason for shame. It is a reason for adjustment. Your life does not need to perfectly reflect your values, but the distance between what you say matters and how you live should become smaller. This is where the idea of design becomes powerful. A designer does not simply look at the finished result. A designer makes choices about structure. What belongs? What does not belong? What needs more space? What needs less? What should be strengthened? What should be removed? You can approach your life in the same way. Maybe you need more time for something important. Maybe you need fewer commitments. Maybe you need to change the way you work. Maybe you need to stop trying to impress people who are not responsible for your future. Maybe you need to make room for something you abandoned years ago. The process can be uncomfortable because every choice creates a trade-off. When you say yes to one direction, you often say no to another. You cannot protect every opportunity. You cannot maintain every relationship at the same level. You cannot pursue every ambition at the same time. A meaningful life requires choosing, and choosing requires accepting that not everything belongs in your future. This does not mean becoming rigid. Your design can change. You will change. Your circumstances will change. Your priorities may change. What matters today may not matter in the same way 5 years from now. That is not failure. It is part of being human. A well-designed life is not a fixed structure. It is something you continue to adjust as you understand yourself better. The goal is not to create a perfect plan and follow it forever. The goal is to stay awake enough to notice when your life no longer reflects what you value. Then make a correction. This is also why you should stop waiting for a complete transformation before enjoying your life. Do not postpone living until everything is finished. There will always be another goal, another problem, another improvement to make. If you spend your entire life preparing to live, you may miss the life you are preparing for. Be ambitious, grow, build, improve, but also notice the ordinary moments. The conversation with someone you love, the quiet morning, the work you are proud of, the meal you enjoy. The small moment when you realize you are no longer reacting the way you once did. These moments are not interruptions to your transformation, they are part of it. At the beginning of this book, we explored the idea that your life is already being designed through your repeated choices. Now you can see the larger picture. Your identity influences your choices. Your choices create patterns. Your patterns become habits. Your habits shape your character. Your character influences the life you create. And the life you create eventually becomes the environment in which your future self grows. That is why this process matters so much. You are not simply changing a few habits. You are participating in the design of your life. So do not leave this book with only inspiration. Leave with decisions. Choose one quality you want to strengthen. Choose one pattern you want to change. Choose one system that will support you. Choose one promise you will keep. Choose one boundary that will protect your progress. Then repeat those choices until they become part of you. You do not need to know exactly who you will be 10 years from now. You only need enough clarity to choose the next direction. Then take the next step. And after that, another. There will be mistakes. There will be setbacks. There will be seasons when progress feels invisible. Keep adjusting. Keep learning. Keep becoming. Because the purpose of this journey was never to create a finished version of you. There is no final version. There is only the person you are choosing to become through the way you live. So look at your life again. Look at your time, your attention, your relationships, your work, your habits, your standards. Ask whether they reflect what truly matters to you. If they do, protect them. If they do not, redesign them. You have more influence than you may have believed. Not over everything, but over enough. Enough to change your direction. Enough to change your patterns. Enough to become someone different. Enough to build a life that feels like your own. And perhaps that is what it means to be designed to become. Not to discover a perfect person hidden somewhere inside you. Not to chase someone else's definition of success. But to make deliberate choices, live them consistently, and allow those choices to shape a life that reflects who you truly want to be. You are still becoming. Your life is still being written, and every ordinary day gives you another chance to decide what comes next. Design it with intention. Live it with courage, and become someone your future self will be grateful you chose to become.